This is called the Cyrus Cylinder. Some bits of it are not there, but it doesn't matter. That's the real thing. The chapter said, he saw it in New York. This hardly ever leaves the museum. Now, I actually did some recording with an American film company who are producing the story of the Bible. And we did it downstairs in the museum, and then they hired the entire museum for a night to film. And they said to me, when you're doing your stuff, they said they might let you have the Cyrus Cylinder to hold. And I said, I just emailed back and said, they are never in a million years going to let, Ian Nobody hold the Cyrus Cylinder. It's one of the most famous pieces in the museum and across the world. But it's famous for us from a biblical standpoint. Prophet Isaiah, about 750 BC, talks about the Babylonian conquest, which doesn't happen until 150 years later. He talks about it in detail, and strikingly, he says at the end of that, you'll be allowed to come home, the fortunes of Jerusalem will be restored, and God says, I'm going to raise up Cyrus, my prince or my shepherd, to let you all go home. So immediately all the historians are going, whoa, wait a minute, this can't happen. You cannot name a king 150 years even before he's become a thing. And we've got a name and so on. So that was really kind of mind-blowing. However, 605 BC, the Babylonian conquest begins. Nebuchadnezzar goes to Jerusalem 3 times, 605, 597, 586 BC. In 586 BC, he destroys Jerusalem and destroys the temple of God in Jerusalem. That's a massive full stop in Israel's history, right? That really does tell you that God is not pleased, because God's already told us he's coming, and he's coming because God's going to send him. So already we've got that. Then you have the 70-year captivity. So in about 530-ish, you then have Cyrus with his Persian kingdom taking over the Babylonian kingdom, and you get to the book of Ezra. And Ezra opens up basically with the statement, Cyrus is the king now, and he's just told us we can all go home. And everybody, all the secular historians go, you are joking. Right? It just, A, Cyrus is the king, but how did Isaiah know about him? And B, nobody ever did this before. None of those ancient kings ever said to all the captives in his kingdom, who are the powerhouse, they're doing all the work, they're generating the economy. Nobody ever said, you can go home now if you want. It just doesn't make sense. Not only go home and rebuild your cities and rebuild the temples to your gods. I mean, it's madness. It really is madness. And so it was just utterly dismissed as part of the sort of exile fiction, really. Until, bless him, an archaeologist called Hormuz Rassam is digging in the Babylonian palace complex, middle 1800s our time. He is actually an evangelical Christian, this guy, and he finds this piece. When he finds it, he records in his record of the find that it was intact. If you look at it now, it ain't intact. When it got back to the British Museum, there's lots of bits missing from it. Same idea as the beards and the arms of the pharaohs downstairs. I mean, something like that is worth an unimaginable fortune. But as a local worker, being paid next to nothing for your efforts, that if you drop it on the floor or you hit it with a hammer and a piece comes off and goes under your sandal, as long as it's got some writing on it, it is worth, again, a fortune to you. So that's all we can assume. Nobody ever explained why Rassam says it was complete, and the museum received this sort of tatty, broken thing, which normally has a few extra bits attached to it, but they're often taken for examination. And I don't doubt that probably even now there are negotiations taking place with private collectors to return some of the missing pieces. But it doesn't take away from the fact that it's a staggering find. There's enough on the door that originally there was enough there, there was all of it there to tell us exactly what it was. It was buried in the Babylonian palace. In other words, it's not for you and me to read. This is for God to read and to know what the king has done, because that's the way the gods find out how great the kings are. And of course the king is responsible for getting it written, so You know, he's always telling a good story, right? He doesn't say, I'm a terrible king, but please, forgive me anyway. He doesn't worry with that. He's a great king. He says, I am Cyrus, I'm king of the whole world. My God, Marduk, made me king of everything. And then he goes on to talk about his exploits. He talks about the slaves that he's got and the cities that he's conquered, all those sorts of things. And then just in passing, he says, I am the one who said to the captured peoples that they could return to their cities and rebuild their temples with my blessing. And again, the historians have just got their jaws strapped up by now because they're constantly hitting the ground. Because of all the pieces we're to find, we find that not the decree of Cyrus, but the affirmation that he made that decree, not just to the Israelites, but to all the captured people in his kingdom. And the question is, why did he do it? Because nobody else has ever done this. And the answer is very simple. He's a clever guy. I said to you, Nebuchadnezzar has to go to Jerusalem 3 times, 605, 597, 586. And in 586, he's so cross with the whole business, he destroys the entire place. Cyrus never had to do stuff like that. Why? Because when he took up his kingship, got everything settled and established, he said to the captive people, if you want to go back to your cities, rebuild them, rebuild the temples to your gods, you can do so with my blessing and with my cash. So they all go home, like, under Ezra and so on, 40-odd thousand not many really, of the Jews go home. And when they get back there, what do they say to the people that are still there? Cyrus is a great guy. He's a lovely bloke. Look what he's done. He's given us money. We can rebuild the city. And so he's actually extending his kingdom by goodwill. People love him. And why does he want the temples of the gods rebuilt? Because although Marduk is his chief god, he'll take credit from anyone. So he's happy to have Yahweh credit, or he's happy to have, some of the other Middle Eastern gods to credit him. He'll take it from anywhere that he can get it. I mean, he is a brilliant chap. There's no question about it. And it's just phenomenal to, again, as I said to you, this is a critical time in our history when everybody's questioning the Bible. Is it real? Is it true? Does it tell us about real stuff, or is it just moralistic stuff we can shrug off? And then at this time, we're getting detailed archaeological finds like this saying, Ezra's right on the money. Isaiah knew exactly what he was talking about. Daniel, was right there in the thick of it. Ezekiel knows what he's talking about. Jeremiah, it's all there in the scriptures for us. And these pieces just give us that boost of confidence because we're so sort of weak and pathetic in our faith, aren't we, a lot of the time? We don't believe the Bible because of this, but what it does is it throws colour and light and life and integrity upon the word that we're reading so that we can preach and teach it confidently to those who are going to sit under us in God's providence and learn. That's a staggering piece.